when I talk about my parenting journey, I have to go back to before I was a Sikh, because before I had embraced Sikhi, I always knew I wanted to be a mother, and everybody around me knew that as well. And I remember when my husband, we were just in the same sangat as each other. We had no idea we were going to get married. And I remember the day that I wore the star for the first time. I went to a camp in Leicester, and he said to me, when you take this step, you are changing a generation to come. And that has stayed with me ever since. It was such an impactful statement that he had made. And I don't know if I quite understood it, but I knew it was something really, really big. And then it somehow, we ended up getting married. Our parents knew each other, and we ended up getting married and stuff. And I said to him, after we got married, do you remember making this statement to me? Do you remember saying this? And he was like, no, I don't remember saying it. And I said, I really want to understand what you meant by it. And he said, you must have had an idea of how you were going to dress your kids, how you were going to raise your kids, the environments you were going to take your kid in, when you were not into Sikhi. You must have imagined these things, because that's what we do as human beings. But he said, now that's all changed. The way you dress your child, the way you talk to your child, the places you take your child, the things you expose your child to, it's going to be completely different. And with God's grace, their children, therefore, will be in that different kind of environment too, and on and on and on. And he said, that's what I meant by changing a generation. I never knew it was going to be such a whirlwind with 4 children, with this individual. But it's been a cool ride, because I've learned so much about myself, and I've learned so much about the concept of conscious parenting, which my parents did not have. So when people read my bio on Instagram and they say, what is this conscious parenting? Your parents raised you without conscious parenting, and you're fine. And I say to them, actually, I've been exposed to really, really rough things in my life. I've been exposed to drunkenness. I've been exposed to objectification in a family environment. I've been exposed to so many things that could have taken me, but Guruji has always kept me in their shell, and not everybody experiences that. And so when I think about conscious parenting, at the core of it, it's that I'm thinking about everything I'm exposing my child to, every word I say, every emotion I use towards my child, or in front of my child, or to somebody else in front of my child. That's conscious parenting to me. And it's hard to be that switched on all the time. And I'm not saying that I am all the time. I do have days when I just go crazy and I need a break. But then that's when you have to have your partner and a tag team and a support network that you can rely on.
That's really amazing to hear. I mean, I've heard of conscious parenting before, but just even the reflections of, like, you've got 4 children, so it's not even like I've got 1, so I feel like 1 is nothing in comparison for the amount of consciousness that goes into every act. I notice with my daughter, who's only 1.5, that sometimes she's just like, mama, and I'm like, oh my God, please. And just to be patient, and then sometimes I'm thinking, I'm really patient today, like, so I have, that kind of, yes, I've won today, and I've been able to keep my cool. But with 4, I can imagine that you're really, like, they need you, don't they? Mom is really important in that, as well as your own work and own, like, family demands, and even mom and dad, like you say, and other family, and your husband as well. Like, it's really complex, isn't it?
There's so many different kind of layers to the situation now, because we've got 4 children that are all very different stages of their life, and they all have very, very different demands of us. And so Preet and I have to regularly check in with each other, because we have to be talking about, with the eldest, she's gonna be heading into puberty now, and so we're noticing a lot of mood swings come up, and we're noticing like real changes in, she doesn't want to play with her sister anymore because their interests are very different, which means the little sister is feeling. So we need to be so conscious of how they're acting, how they're interacting, and making sure that we are more proactive as opposed to reactive. And so Yeah, it is hard, but I wouldn't say it's harder for me than it is for when I had one child, I found it hard. You know, when I had two children, I found it hard. When I had three, lots of people said to me, oh, you know what, when you go from 1 to 2, that's the hardest. When you go from 2 to 3, oh, it's like nothing. For us, we didn't find it hard when we went from 1 to 2. We found it hard when we went from 2 to 3. So it's different for different people. So we can never make a judgment that, you know what, that person's got 4 children, so they must be so amazing. They must be so good, or they must be so, you know, inundated. Everybody's different. So if anyone's listening out there and they feel to themselves that I've got one child, I've got 2 children, I can't handle it, I've got no children, I still don't have time. That's you know, that's your mind. That's your mindset telling you don't have time. We all have time. We make time. You know, my Thursday nights are my time. Gurpreet Singh takes all the kids. I express my milk, and he takes all 4 of them to my in-laws, and I get the whole night to myself. I have a coach, so I spend time with my coach, and you know, I get up to gear on certain things with Sikh Mum, and talking to people and things that I'm involved in. So there are ways around it.
So there's something that I wanted to pick up on. So obviously the struggle is real when it comes to parenting, and it's really nice that you make it look easy. And I know we all struggle every day, and I personally have struggled. But in terms of the conscious parenting, so for me, it's like you said, it's about being aware of how you're talking, what you're doing. But one of the biggest things that's affected me is things like trauma, like childhood trauma. It's passing down those kind of belief systems and habits that we're not aware that we're doing. So that's been a real challenge for me, and that's what kind of started my parenting journey. Where in terms of conscious parenting, was realizing that actually I have all of these beliefs that I haven't questioned, I wasn't even aware of before. And now I'm thinking about what have I done to my children when they were younger. You know, I had a lot of kind of anger coming up as well, frustration, you know, overwhelmed, not knowing what to do with that. So what would you say in terms of kind of some tips to people like me who have really struggled in the past? How do we become aware, so become conscious of what we're doing with our parenting, and then also how do we take that forward and implement it?
You know what, Benji, that's so much giveaway that you've asked that question. I mean, there's something happening, because I am going to be 40 years old, and I am only now dealing with a childhood trauma that I experienced. And it's been a really rough ride, because it's been causing me to have anxiety when I think about it, when I think about how I'm going to cope with it. And I'm really, as soon as I have that feeling come on me, I think I get scared more than anything, because I don't know when that feeling of anxiety is going to hit me. That scares me, that it's just come on, and I'm like, I don't know what the trigger was, and it's just come. And then, so my husband, as you know, he works in mental health, so I'm straight away, I'm like, I'm feeling loads of anxiety. And he said, okay, what's just happened in the last half an hour? What have been in your mind? You know, he'll talk me through these things. And I actually keep all of that away from the kids. So if it happens, we'll go into another room or something like that. But sorry, going back to what you were saying about dealing with it. The key for me has been, I feel like this is a blessing. The uncomfortableness that I'm feeling makes me feel like I am actually working through it, which means that I'm getting through something. If I didn't feel uncomfortable about it, I feel like maybe I'm just suppressing it and nothing's happening. But because I'm feeling uncomfortable and all these questions are coming up about what I've experienced and why this happened to me. So for me, the first thing I would say, if you do have some sort of trauma and you feel like you're okay, but you have concerns that you may reflect those onto your children and your parenting style, I'd probably say try to ask yourself some of those uncomfortable questions, but be prepared that if you want to open that can of worms, you need to see it through, and there will be uncomfortable situations and feelings that you're going to be having with, and conversations with yourself that you're going to be having, but you also need to have a support network to do that. You need to be, what I'm trying to say is you need to be really ready to do that, because you're doing it while you're parenting. So when I'm sometimes in my deep thought and I'm thinking about things, or I'm journaling, or I'm doing I do a lot of spider diagrams or make a lot of lists. When I'm doing all that kind of stuff, I try, Simmer, who's my eldest, so she's 11 years old, so she's very aware of what's happening. She'll peek over my shoulder and she's like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, no, it's nothing. And she was like, no, tell me, mummy, because I'm really open with her. So all of a sudden it's like, why don't you want to talk to me about that? And I say to her, you know what, this is something that happened to mummy, and I will tell you when you're a bit older, but right now you don't need to know. But then it's just about, ask yourself those questions before you open that can of worms. Do you want your pet children to be aware of it? How are you going to deal with it? Who's going to be your support network around you? And what do you want as the outcome of going through this trauma?
I think it's a difficult choice, but is it actually a choice? Because this stuff, if it starts to come up, if you start to recognize that there's some deeper things going on, most of the time there's nothing you can do about it. And if you carry on resisting it, it's actually more painful. So I would, completely echo what you say, is find some support. And it could just be, someone who's a safe space, who will listen, keep it confidential and support you. Or it could be, reach out and get help, go and see a counselor. That's something that I've done personally. And I found it really, really helpful, is just to have that space where I know, it's not going to go out in the community, where I can just talk openly about things that have happened, and get some closure on it. And it's not about about blaming anybody, or ruining anybody's life. It's, you're doing it for yourself. And it makes you a better parent, because like you said, then you're not passing that trauma down consciously or unconsciously to your children as well. So it's definitely worth doing. But like you said, Guru tells us, it's a very fine and difficult path, but it's definitely, I feel like it's definitely worth doing.